Welcome to the PRL podcast, episode 113. I'm here tonight with Ethan Montgomery.
What's up?
And Alex Miller.
Yo.
And a newcomer to the program, Nick Calcaterra.
That's close enough, yeah.
Nick
Calcaterra, yeah, no.
Calcaterra. That was pretty close, dude.
It was pretty good. I think you did. I'll give it 8 out of 10. Would do
cool,
it again.
man. So, dude, like, where are you coming from? So, like you're saying, like...
Canton, unfortunately.
Yeah, but you're saying you're talking with Alexis last night?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
Alexis, huh?
Yeah, so, and you say, now you say, after talking with Alexis, you took your Gary Johnson bumper sticker off your car today.
I did, yeah. I did.
Okay, so,
it was a weird moment for me. I feel like I put a lot of emotion and invested into Gary Johnson, and I don't know, I guess... In the last few months, well, I'd say last 2-3 months, I've been doing a little bit more research about how that campaign was run and hearing different opinions and I guess
no
anecdotes.
Feel the Johnson.
No, I feel like the reaction now is more of a kind of flaccid response.
So what happened? Like, did you find Aleppo on a map, or what exactly was the impetus?
The impetus, I would say in general. I mean, I think it's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. I think it's just kind of an aggregate of information and evidence.
You thought McAfee was just much sexier.
I mean,
that's fair.
That's not wrong. I mean, I think they both have their kind of charms about them, for sure. I would say that if I had to kind of break lines and go full homo. Yeah, I think I would. I think I'd go with McAfee. Yeah, you're right.
You'd rather snort coke off of John McAfee's rear end
than smoke pot out of Gary Johnson's asshole. And yeah, I can see that, yeah. I think it'd be more pleasant.
Even work? Like, where would the carb be?
The carb?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't know. You like squeeze his nose. It also makes like a honking sound when you do it, though. That's the problem with Gary. Is like, I don't know. It's just too kind of cliche, tacky for me. I think that's, McAfee kind of gives off that, most interesting man in the world vibe. I mean, it's cliche, but it's true, right?
Yeah, so. But I mean,
and I don't know how to like salsa, but I bet he could teach me.
I mean, I think he's the only open political runner who was proudly announced his marriage to a prostitute. So,
yeah, and she's not even good looking,
bold.
but
Yeah, well, I mean, McAfee, he's pretty much a total degenerate as a person, which isn't, assuming we're talking about big L libertarian party, we're talking about actual politics. So being a degenerate doesn't exactly help. And I don't really know much about him beyond that, other than I know that he caused a lot of outrage, at least among the libertarian circles I run in, when he was critical of, I think it was the audience at the debate, or perhaps just libertarianism in general, but was critical of it because it was all white males, which I find to be an infuriating position. If in fact that is his position, I don't recall the actual quote that I'd read, but that's just absolute horse shit. If you want to be critical of libertarianism, like, if you want to be critical of the fact, anything regarding the fact that it's mostly white males, you should be critical of the fact that non-white males aren't libertarians. Those are the people you should be criticizing, not the people that are supposed to already be in your camp.
I wouldn't criticize them, but but I agree. Like, it's the problem isn't so much that we have a lot of white males, is that we should have a lot more of everyone. So,
right, because again, like, our message is supposed to be one of individualism, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, what it boils down to.
Ostensibly.
So,
you want to be a brutalist individual?
If every person is an individual, and that's what the whole political driving force behind this club is, and an outsider walks in and says, "Hey, if everyone's an individual and you believe that, why is there not that representation? Like, if 50% of the population is one part, like, because." We all look at it as individuals, there's got to be some cultural, just stupid, arbitrary thing get in the way. And for the sake of reaching as many people as possible, like, I don't know, jump those hurdles.
I would just like to push back that, I know individualism is, a big facet of the whole philosophy, but I come from a camp where it's not about individualism. That's sort of a tertiary thing, but it's really about property rights, or at least that's the perspective that I hold. Starting with self-ownership and then extending from there.
Okay, but that sounds very strange because you just said individualism is tertiary, but what you just then boiled down the core was property rights and self-ownership. That was the main thing. And I was like, what is that if not within a context of individualism?
But that's not mutually exclusive of other collectivist ideas. Not in the necessarily political sense. But I mean, you can absolutely consider yourself part of a collective and still maintain self-ownership. I just don't think that individualism should be placed at the the foundation or the center of the whole philosophy. I think that's a side effect of what I view as the fundamental premise, which is property rights.
Right.
And yes, self-ownership is obviously at the core of property rights, and individualism, is an extension of self-ownership. But again, it's an extension of the principles of property rights. It's just a different perspective. It's not a different idea. It's just a different way of looking at it, I think.
Yeah. And no, I was just mulling it over. And I will. I gotta tell you though, my initial reaction to try and conceive of something as impactful as property rights, which is, that's the legitimate stand of this is mine, justified use force to exclude it. To remove that from that, baseline individualist ethical context, I don't know. It gives me pause, but
well, you say ethical context. I mean, I don't know that there really is an ethical component to individualism, at least not inherently.
Of course, there's a component to it. I think that's kind of the point of it, right? I mean, the argument is what is the most, do you want to believe in this kind of consequentialism, or do you want to have deontological kind of ethics, like the individual and like individuals' rights versus what is, what's best for some sort of human-centric kind of, argument, right? So I think it absolutely is.
Every political philosophy has underlying givens that it takes from the epistemological and metaphysical levels before that in thought, even if it's not explicit. Ayn Rand was actually really good at breaking this down, but yeah. Anyway, I don't think you can get completely away from it.
No, well, and I didn't say that you should get away from individualism. I just think that individualism is an extension of property rights rather than property rights being somehow an extension of individualism. I mean, I don't really see how individualism as a premise then necessarily leads to all these other conclusions.
So not to be that asshole, but like as someone who doesn't really have like a deep-seated investment in either argument, I think it's more or less kind of semantic.
It is.
At the end of the day, like no matter where you kind of more highly weigh either of those factors, if you can even divorce the two from each other, I think it kind of comes out to the same outcomes. And I think you guys are still going to agree on, again, 99.9% of things. So I really don't think it's like even a big deal.
Well, I mean, it does have consequences in terms of where you end up, at least in terms of where your priorities lie, I think. But that said, I mean,
what actions you pursue, for sure.
I agree.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, like I said, I mean, they're not different things; they're just different perspectives. I certainly don't disagree with individualism. It's just a question of what direction are you going to look at it from. So you're right. I mean, it is a semantic argument for sure.
No, but you're right. Like, there's going to be different opinions on certain matters. But I think, in the context of like policy or like in talking with each other and our cooperations with other people, I think you guys are going to fall in the same kind of slot every time.
So, I mean, like, would you honestly have rather have picked McAfee over over Gary Johnson?
Probably.
No. And even going back in time, knowing what I know now,
I think Gary Johnson's
I would still
just
vote
more...
for Gary Johnson.
Yeah.
Like, if I was in the primary, I would still go for like.
What was the name of the fat guy that stripped down to his underwear?
James Weeks.
We should never talk about that guy ever. I don't even know who that dude is. So I'm just like of all the stupid shit you could fucking do,
dude. I loved it personally.
I mean,
thought it was awesome.
it's funny, but like
I thought it was funny too.
I mean,
do that shit somewhere else. I don't know, man.
No, I don't know, man.
It captures the spirit of libertarianism,
dude.
Unfortunately, I hate how that's accurate.
Dude, libertarians never even get publicity. Bad publicity is good publicity, dude. And dude, let's make this the fucking rock star party, dog.
We were actually getting good publicity. This is the first time we were actually getting organic like publicity that was like really, I think, all positive. Like that. If anything, that was just a guitar.
They've been saying that every year since Ron Paul.
Well, and I mean, of course, then Gary Johnson fucked it up anyway. So
I mean, I don't know, man. Like out of everybody else running, like I mean, Bill Weld heavily disappointed me, but out of everybody else running, I don't think I had a better choice personally.
I mean, I'm not gonna defend Bill Weld in any context. Well, that's not true. I will defend him in one context, which is using him for his name, in a position where essentially he didn't do anything, right?
And that's what I thought initially. And I don't think I can only assume that Gary Johnson wasn't counting on Bill Weld to nearly endorse Hillary Clinton on Rachel Maddow, or to say he would take guns away from citizens without due process, But those are things that he did, and those are things that really fucking pissed me off.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
All right. So next I see on the board over there is the Paris Agreement. I guess you guys wanted to talk about that.
Yeah.
For some reason I saw Paris in A and I assumed it said attack. Silly me. Of course, there's all that going on too. But the Paris Agreement, Trump withdrew from. Basically it was just an agreement, not a treaty. It had no teeth, and so. It's not like it really makes any difference either way, but of course, the left in particular is completely losing their shit over it.
Oh yeah. If we don't sign this agreement, we're going to die tomorrow. We're all going to be fucking boiling in our own juices tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, what I find is hilarious, and even some leftists are picking up on this, and to that extent, good job, Trump. That's some great 4D chess. The leftists are now saying, oh well. Now that we've suffered this horrible defeat for all of humanity and the environment, now it'll have to be up to the state governments and the governors and captains of industry to take the lead on green energy and blah blah blah. Which is like, yeah, duh. Finally, that's what we've been saying the whole time. So
it's like shake you like a baby. I understand.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a huge win on every front.
I think a lot of them forgot what it felt like to be distrustful of government. So I graduated college 2009, and all of the radical folks, who they're cool folks, they were hip, they were with it. All of them at the end went to Obama, and I was like, oh, but come on, really?
Yeah,
and then almost all of them afterwards,
Bush for 8 years.
They're now mainstream.
Remember, when hippies generally didn't like the government? Remember that was the thing? Was
not born. No.
That was well. I didn't. I wasn't born there either. But
yeah, well, but then they grew up and now they hold all the power in government and academia and the media, etc. So of course they love power because now they have it. I mean, it's the same. It's just like the freedom of speech issue. Of course, all throughout the '60s they were screaming, and of course, a lot of this was centered at Berkeley, where of course, they had riots over free speech in opposition of it. Now,
did I tell you I'm moving to Berkeley?
Cool.
Jesus.
Yeah, I'm moving. I'll be there August. I'm going to law school. I'll be there for 3 years. So if you guys need a correspondent in the ground, the next battle for Berkeley, I'm gonna set up shop. I'm gonna fucking be selling Pepsis and anti-tear gas shit,
and like Kyle Wagner mugs.
the wag swag.
That would be bought by both sides, I do believe. And so that's really what I want to do. Is I want to have people come together and realize they can solve their differences through consumerism.
Yeah, dude.
Well, good luck convincing the left to actually try to solve anything.
Dude, it's gonna be
fun.
I'm
pretty sure we need to punch Nazis.
That'll solve everything.
What if you punch Kyle Wagner? I mean, what happens then? Anyway, I shouldn't have said that. He's gonna be mad at me.
Dude, that was messed up, dude. Why would you suggest aggression against Kyle?
Because he's violating my nap. Clearly.
Self-defense.
Police.
When is it okay to shoot Kyle, dude?
When is it okay to shoot Kyle Wagner?
When he votes.
When is it okay to throw him out of a helicopter?
Right. No. Me and Kyle are good friends. We hung out last night, legitimately. I swear.
Cool.
It'll be okay.
So I mean, the Paris Agreement. I mean, it seems like it's a total win. For obviously people on the right, love it. Libertarians in general ought to love it.
For someone who doesn't know much about it, why ought we to like it?
because
or
it was,
the removal from it. I don't know much about it.
because it was complete horseshit. And if you actually, and I'm not an expert on this, but if you read into it, it was basically just money transfers from quote unquote developed nations to quote unquote undeveloped nations, which and this is a phrase Molyneux uses all the time, which is you're just taking money from poor people in rich countries and giving it to rich people in poor countries. So it would achieve absolutely nothing in terms of actual environmental impact.
Oh yeah, so I think it was like Saudi Arabia. So like the big part of this was people like projecting out what their carbon emissions were going to be in the next 10 years or whatever, right? So like, and the big thing was like Saudi Arabia apparently in the next 5 years was going to raise their emissions. I mean, I could be wrong, so fact check this, but whatever period of time that they thought was appropriate, like it was going to raise to like 111% of what it was today. And as a deal of taking 30-something billion dollars, they make it 88%. So essentially, that is the accomplishment of the Paris Treaty or Paris Agreement. Is essentially taking these countries who are going to double their emissions in the next 10 years, paying them billions of dollars to make it instead of double, like 1.5, 1.7. That is essentially what we're banking on. Like, I understand people wanting to make an impact, but if you're not tempering like how you perceive those impacts with cost, you're a madman.
You could do much more help by going vegan. It's much easier.
That's
anyway.
I don't know. I love meat, so
yeah. Well, I mean, the two biggest, again, assuming you think that carbon emissions are a problem, and that debate, I personally do not think is completely settled. But that aside, the two biggest polluters, are India and China, and are projected to be increasing at a radically faster rate than the rest of the world.
Well, what about government?
The Paris Agreement obviously wouldn't achieve any of that.
The U.S. Navy
and that's
like a motherfucker.
Well, yeah, and on another good point that I've heard lots of people bring up, and I know again Molyneux has brought this up a lot of times, is that if you really want to help the environment, you should be cutting taxes and reducing government spending, because government spending essentially is taking consumption that would normally be deferred into the future and bringing it into the present. It's a time preference thing, and so there's all this. All these tax revenues and government spending is consumption, and for sure that includes the military, who is a huge polluter, or so I've heard. So again, I mean, there's all these like billions upon billions, hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars of consumption that is going to happen in the here and now, that would normally be deferred to the future, and so that is de facto increasing, environmental, destruction. Not to mention, obviously it's anti-capitalist, and capitalism is all about efficiency. It's people used to say, the USB stick did more to save the forest than any environmentalist greenie ever did.
Right.
By moving towards the paperless office and all this and that. So again, I mean, it's anti-capitalist, and capital investments are all about increasing efficiency, and so all you're doing is you're taking money away from investments that would be increasing efficiency going forward in the future, and then instead you're going to have government spending that's going to increase consumption in the here and now, which is anti-environmental, if you will.
Yep.
Word.
I concur.
I feel like I've adopted somewhat of a geo-libertarian viewpoint recently, and maybe y'all can offer some insight on.
A geo-libertarian?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that means.
Basically, there are other forms of ownership other than strict property rights. There's the unowned commons, that is nature, before it's homesteaded. Anyway, so the point, the question I was going to bring was, I feel like it would be a geo-libertarian position, or I think a valid one, so I'm asking you guys, to be, you can do whatever you want on your own private property, for sure. But when it comes to discharge, waste, pollution, like even if you find some place in nature that's yet untouched, I would still say it is somewhat of an NAP violation to just dump something potentially toxic
so you're saying
in the unowned commons that is nature. Like, I don't think that should be allowed.
But who's the victim?
Well, besides the animals and the people who are there,
if there are people there, then it wouldn't be unowned.
What's that?
You said the people that are there, but if there are people there, then...
Oh, I said the animals that are there.
And people.
You threw in people after that.
This is being recorded, so we're going to on this.
So we're fact-checked, but anyway.
Well, so is this... I think it's an interesting point. is the concern then that you know, let's say you're dumping toxic waste in the middle of the forest or something, is a concern that it will then leach into the soil and ruin other people's actually currently owned property? You know, for example, dumping it into a stream that's then going to flow downstream into, you know, a town that actually does own and use the river, or is the concern just of the destruction of the unowned property itself?
Well, I mean, frankly, it's twofold, but let's even ignore environmental concerns. If we go back to what is strict Lockean theory of where we derive most of our property rights from, the only reason you could have a justifiable use of force to exclude others from this, from whatever it is you've done with the farm you built, the house you built, etc., the only justification is because, you know, what mutualists call occupancy and use, what Locke called mixing your labor with the soil, what libertarians and ANCAPs commonly refer to as homesteading. That's the only reason that you can defend. You can't just declare markers, fence off something that you've not yet done just to exclude them. That's not cool as well. So, if the only justified reason to use force to prevent someone from using something is that sort of homesteading, if you prevent someone else from using the resources that are given, but it was through a different means, such as, hey, you know, fuck y'all, I'm preventing your access to it, I'm just doing it this other way. Like, I think...
Can you give an example? But
it's not something that they own, right? So they're not being a victim at the end of the day, so it doesn't matter.
I mean, can you give like an example of like how this would actually manifest in the real world? 'Cause I'm not entirely following. I think I am, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay,
go ahead.
I'll let him talk. No, it's your argument. I'll let you flush it out.
I mean, the only thing I can think to really say is to come back to the only justifiable reason to prevent someone from using a piece of property is through homesteading. Then if you use another means to prevent someone from accessing those resources, that is invalid.
What do you mean? What do you mean? But what resources and by what means are you talking about preventing other people's
whether
access
it's a stream?
You realize the consequences of your argument is essentially saying that it's the same idea of violating self-ownership, right? So you're saying
I don't.
No, you
How
do.
so?
So like a good example in the situation is if you know, that there's a plot of land, and then there's like a very center, but I own everything this plot of land except for the very center, which is I don't own. It's just I will consider it, you know, yet to be homesteaded.
Right.
And so you're saying that me saying that you can't cross my land is preventing you to be able to use resources that is unowned. That's what you're saying, right? But because of that, you're essentially applying positive rights to your situation, and essentially it's allowing me to be victimized. Like, and I'm losing certain aspects of the right of the property that I own due to your application of positive rights here.
I think it's a misunderstanding. It's a miscalculated guess into the future. So as a libertarian, one thing I get is, oh, so you only want a future where the rich corporations have power and you're just a wage slave. Yes, that's why I'm a libertarian. Exactly, you got it. No, fucking of course not. So when you say that, you're forgetting that even through the development of common law, there are easements, if nothing else. So, like,
I don't see how this applies. So what's your position here? Then, like, I don't understand. Like,
then maybe I missed yours. I'm sorry. I've had a few, but
okay. So I'm saying why? So your argument, in summary, is essentially that you don't believe people can use other means, with the exception of homesteading, to prevent people from using unowned land. With the first example being that, like, if I just dumped toxic waste,
right, with the conclusion being that pollution is a legitimate no. You know, to put it, simple words. Pollution
that's a weird thing because we're constantly polluting the earth, and just existing pollutes the earth in some aspects. So I think it's kind of a weird thing to say.
One could argue just taking a shit in the woods is polluting.
No, just breathing.
In a sense.
Us breathing is polluting the earth for any human beings.
Well, and that's why I asked for clarification. I mean, are we talking about pollution that will then leach into other property that is already owned, or are we talking about purely just on
He's talking about non-victim.
unowned?
He's talking about a victimless crime.
Well, certainly I agree with the former. I think that goes without saying. But
Yeah,
no,
I mean,
I would even
that's
say
that's a pretty clear-cut case.
Right.
You know, if I dump toxic waste in the river that then flows down to
Yeah.
Somebody else's property, on the bank of the river or something, then obviously I violated their property rights because now their property on the side of the river is all fucked up. So that's pretty clear.
And I'm not prescribing sentencing, like send someone to jail for 50 years for doing it. But no,
Well, so
maybe it's not someone's property, but if they're still toxic dumping somewhere, that's not okay.
Well, so, I mean, if I build a toxic dump facility in the middle of the woods, isn't that homesteading that property? And thus, as long as it's safe and doesn't leach out and hurt other people, then haven't I just homesteaded that piece of property as my toxic waste dump?
If the only reason is a receptacle for toxic waste, I don't think a jury would hold that up as homesteading.
So steel manning your argument here, I think. What you're trying to say is like your unique position here to where it's, I think, kind of the full crux of avoiding direct victimization.
Together, man.
It's okay. You'll do okay. But essentially, like an unowned plot of land, like someone goes to Antarctica and they just decide to dump a bunch of fucking toxic like nuclear waste in a place that's just like not owned by anybody. And you're saying unilaterally when you do this, like, it is just like bad and it is something that we should be prevented from doing.
Unless you can give me some really freaking convincing argument why it's good for the health of, like, because, dude, like, I value polar bears.
So your answer
I
is
value
yes.
my son more. So if you give me some
Your answer is
reason,
yes.
like, my son will die unless we do this, no, that's not okay. We got to find another way.
Well, so, I mean,
there's no
I think that's reasonable.
So there's no economic like logic behind your argument, then, right?
Of course
you
there's
you said like your son has to die essentially. Like there's no like
No,
saying
dude.
like, oh, it's like statistically like ineffective because no one lives there.
He's saying
it's not
like,
leaching out.
He's saying like, do you even nap, bro?
bro.
No, I'm not going to finish my sentence.
So
I'm not gonna do
what is
that.
a nuclear power plant supposed to do with their, let's say their spent fuel rods? I mean, what are they supposed to do with it?
Well, hey, man, I hear space technology is advancing. We might be able to just eject it into space somewhere.
You know, the Zerg have NAP too, bro.
No, hold on. But isn't space
I don't think that is
unowned
a
and somebody
scientifically
might want to
measurable
go-
effect of littering.
Well, okay, so now you're just
How
talking
many
about a matter of
microperiods?
degree. I mean, you could say, well, space is unowned, and so if somebody else wants to go out into space, they
Right.
might hypothetically want
Exactly.
to homestead
But look-
something. But I mean, so I mean, basically, you're saying like nuclear power is a violation of somebody's rights in some way because.
No,
I don't quite understand. I mean, like a toxic waste dump, I don't see how that's not a legitimate homesteading. I mean, again, assuming that it's built properly such that it's contained on the site and, it's not leaching out into the water supply or whatever. How is that a problem?
Right, and maybe it's semantic because based on some of the circumstances you describe, again, I feel an immediate agreement to, but...
Well, so that's why I'm looking for like a specific of like how would this argument manifest in the real world?
So here's where I think the issue is coming in. Similar to how I say to people, I'm a libertarian, and they say, oh, well, that means you don't care about children being educated, or how would this work? Like the finer details of it. What I am introducing, basically the only thing I'm defending is like... basically anti-pollution and why that is within the justification of greater property rights. How everything's going to work, just similar to, hey, assault's valid, but man, I have a 2.5-year-old. He might hit you. I'm sorry. I like watch him, but sometimes anyway.
So wait,
he doesn't really hit. He's a
Here's
really
question
sweet
for
kid. But if he did, it's not like, oh, I'm assaulted. I can now pound this whatever person. Like, there's going to be that nuance. There's going to be those.
But here's the
common
problem,
law
though. Is
developments.
like, do you believe that any amount of pollution automatically results in like a loss of value in the world?
No, because you can think of me as my cigarette butt.
Okay,
Yeah. So no,
All right.
I think it can get to a point where it is, but in and of itself, there's always going to be some waste. Sure.
I mean,
But does that matter?
I mean, I drink one beer a week, and that's not a problem. If I drank 30 beers a week, that could be a problem.
So you believe it's not an issue then? Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, to me, it just sounds like, I mean, of course, I mean, we've all heard the ridiculous accusations like, oh, well, you're only libertarian because you don't care about the environment. I mean, this sounds like you're just trying to signal, like,
right.
Or no, but I do care about the environment. It's like, well...
You just want to smoke pot.
Yeah, or any one of these number of absurd, stupid arguments. But I don't think that, we need to come up with some new term or new argument to address what I think is pretty clearly explained and addressed by, traditional property rights, Lockean or otherwise. Again, I mean, if it's inhibiting other people's use of their actual property, then yeah, that's a problem. But if it's not, then it's not. I mean, I don't know if there's like some sort of contention with building a toxic waste dump. But again, I mean, if it's built properly, what's the problem?
Right.
So, sorry.
No, by all means. I
was gonna say, do you want to switch topic and talk about the problem of Locke?
No. We were gonna fight next and then get to Locke. No, just kidding.
Because I was hoping.
I thought Locke was the fight. So I'm not aware of this. So I mean, I'm aware of Kinsella.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, mostly for his stuff he's put out on IP. Yeah. But so he has some sort of contention with Lockean property rights.
So this is like kind of an old thing too. It's actually kind of old, but it's like something that I kind of, I'd say, rediscovered maybe 3-4 months ago. So Kinsella is like kind of my libertarian hero. I hope he doesn't see this and hear me say that, because that would make me like really embarrassed.
I mean,
yeah, dude, you totally sound like a libertarian queero.
We've already messaged him. Don't worry.
Sucking Kinsella's dick.
I'm really embarrassed right now.
So what's Kinsella's argument?
So I can't really recapitulate right now, but in general, right? What a cock tease. But in general, I think what his argument kind of concludes is that he believes that Locke essentially gave credence and like gave like the proto argument for the value of a labor theory of value, or value theory of labor. Well,
labor theory
of value. Sorry.
So how okay.
So they're in the. It has to do essentially with his argument with homesteading, with the idea that you should mix your labor with with property to essentially claim ownership, right? So and it has to do with a couple other things too. But like in general, like it's really interesting that we talk about Locke, and Locke has this preeminent role in libertarian discussions about property rights, but at the same time, like I think, and it's a good argument for like heterodox and whatnot, is that we need to step away, and I think this is true of libertarianism in general, is that we need to step away from like holding, like propping up a lot of like big names in our philosophy as like being like infallible, right? So, and I think this happens. Sure. So I think I think a lot of people don't criticize Rothbard enough. I think a lot of people don't criticize Hoppe enough. I think a lot of people don't. I mean, definitely a lot of people don't criticize Ayn Rand enough. I mean, I think it's a little bit, but I think the same deal goes back even to Locke. And I think when you look at a strictly Lockean perspective for property rights, I think it's problematic.
So how does Lockean property rights, the homesteading principles of mixing your labor with unowned resources, how does that then arrive at the labor theory of value?
So I'm trying to remember exactly right now, but I've had it do. So I would say definitely check out Kinsella's argument on YouTube. It's posted a number of different places. Like,
so Kinsella made an argument to that effect? Like,
yes.
In favor of the labor theory of value?
Well,
I'm not saying I disagree.
He believes Locke started the labor theory of value. Well, not started, but essentially he has justified it for a number of generations. Like,
right.
I mean, is it because his argument actually supports it? Because I mean, I obviously don't see that at all. I mean, I do.
No, he just said it like in this like off kind of context. But essentially, it's.
I mean, I guess maybe because he used the word labor, then people can misinterpret and twist it into.
Well, no, I think he was serious about it. Like, I feel really bad because I can't remember right now the exact like couple lines. I feel really embarrassed, but I would say. Kinsella's got this post on YouTube. Check out his argument. But I think in general, like as we've been talking about Locke a lot today, I think it's important to realize that Locke is not the be-all, end-all of property rights, and I think he was actually pretty wrong.
We were just talking about the proviso and how we had some skepticism to it.
Was that Kinsella's argument, that the proviso thing, or?
Oh, I don't know. Nick,
I can't remember. No, I think, but God damn it! Sorry, I don't remember.
I mean, I could see how some sort of leftist could twist that into the labor theory of value by completely bastardizing.
Christ.
By completely bastardizing, the entire concept, because I mean, obviously,
Please day after, dude.
The
I know what you're talking about.
It's obviously, the homesteading principle is about ownership, and it's supposed to be an objective standard to objectively determine ownership, and of course, the libertarian theory of value is subjective theory of value.
Yeah. Wait, are you a natural rights guy?
That's the Austrian economic theory.
Are you more
it's
like
not value based? It's not
really? Okay.
Based.
Like not into the ethical intuitionism, David Hume shit.
I'm not familiar.
Michael
with
Hume,
it.
not David Hume. Mix that up.
I'm honestly not familiar with it. But no, I mean, property. So the whole point of property rights is to have an objective standard by which we determine ownership, because that is something that has to be dealt with objectively. So the whole point of property rights, the whole concept is designed to reduce conflict by having an objective standard by which we determine who controls what scarce resources. But theories of value are completely different from property rights. I mean, you don't have to assign a value to a piece of property. All you need to know is objectively who is the owner, which is a pretty binary isn't the right word for it, but it's sort of like it's either this or it's that.
It's a legitimate principle.
Oh, that was that was part of the
accuracy.
argument. So I think Kinsella goes into this, and I think I remembered half of it. One half of it is that you technically don't own your labor. I think that was one thing he was kind of talking about, the idea of property rights, because labor is not an ownable thing. Like, you own your body, you have self-ownership. You don't own yourself, because that's kind of also kind of a nebulous kind of idea, especially when you consider the fact that we live under a government, and the government technically mandates certain things. We can never own ourselves in the current system, but owning our own body is clearly something we can do, but I think his idea is that labor is not an ownable thing. I think that was part of the argument, but I can't remember. There's like another part of it.
I mean, I know certainly Molyneux comes from the perspective, and this is maybe part of UPB.
For lack of a better word.
Is
gross.
is that you own the effects of your actions, i.e., you are responsible for your actions. And now perhaps this will veer off into a semantic argument that won't get us anywhere. But I think without hearing the support of that argument, I'm not sure that I buy it or maybe even follow it. In terms of you don't own your labor. I guess I'm just not even really sure what that means.
Well, it's not scarce, right? So by definition of property,
sure it is.
Property,
the most scarce resource of all is time, and so what I do with my time, whether I'm
but
on one
the actual
task or
action
laboring on
itself,
another task.
though, right? So
but
the point of scarcity is that by using it, you prevent someone else from using this fixed unit, right?
Right. Okay. So time does not count.
So it will. Well, it's a little bit different, and this does get into a semantic kind of thing as well. So you're right there, but like in general, like it is not something that by doing it restricts someone else, and it's so I think that's what really the definition of property has come down to, the scarcity.
Okay, well, I mean, there is scarcity involved in labor because the ultimate scarcity that we all face is a scarcity of time, because we obviously have a fixed amount of time that we are alive, and so we have to decide what we are going to use our time doing. So,
but you're changing.
But there's nothing doing it. It's really your body.
Motivations.
It's really what your body is doing, right? So you own your body. I can believe that.
Yeah. Well, I guess I
this abstract idea of like, because you don't own time, right?
Or using time doesn't necessarily detract other people from using their time.
Well, no, but
so
exactly.
It goes to what we share.
So it's not because it's not.
It goes to what we bump into each other with.
Yeah, well, I guess in that sense, time is only a scarce resource to me. Mm-hmm. But obviously, what I choose to spend my time on does not preclude anybody else from.
I think if you're being precise, it's not time. It's time of your body. It's use of your body. It's not necessarily time.
Well, okay, but I can only use my body for a fixed amount of time, so. Thus,
but I think you have to couple it with body there, because that's the important point. Is that it's this physical, concrete thing that is ownable and scarce. Like, your body is scarce. Like,
Sure,
you
yeah.
giving up, you cutting off your arm, giving it to someone, and selling to them clearly has inhibited you from using that arm at this point.
Yeah, no,
I think that is where
I'm
the
with you on
property
that.
that is where the property right really stands in your body.
Okay. I'm just still not clear on how he gets from. I'm not saying I disagree with the argument. I guess I just don't quite understand what the argument is of how then.
Because labor in itself is not necessarily like, it's not like a concrete thing. Like, you can create property labor.
I see the point that it's not in conflict with other people, and again, you know, the property rights are all about conflict resolution among people. So I mean, I see where it's starting. So I mean, if
I'll send you a link tomorrow.
Yeah, no,
I mean, video because I'm too fucking stupid to like help you out here. I'm so bad.
Yeah, no, I mean, I
apologize.
I find it interesting.
No, I think you're gonna love it. Like, he's got a couple lectures on this. I think you'll like it a lot because I think, I think Kinsella based God,
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously, Kinsella's, he obviously believes in property rights, at least in a very similar way to the rest of us do. So I guess it's not like he doesn't believe that anything can't be homesteaded, or at least that things can't be owned. So I guess I'm just curious as to what his theory is to how we come to own it. If it's not mixing our labor with otherwise unknown resources,
so
then
this will address it.
All right. Well,
it'll because he talks about that too. We'll address that.
So, and you said this isn't something he necessarily like just put out recently. This is something.
No, it's like
this
is a few years out. Yeah, this is a few years old. Yeah.
Okay. Well, fair enough.
Check it out. Sure. Like, sorry I couldn't recapitulate today. I'm a little
under the weather.
Different. Put that way, different.
Why don't we talk about some current events? I'm curious because I don't know anything about this. Bill Maher was dropping the N-bomb and people are all up in arms, or that's my understanding of the headline. So I guess, was this something on his show? What is it, Real Time? I think it's his current show.
I mean, it's funny because he used to host that show. Was it called, like, Politically Incorrect?
Or Real Time.
Yeah, well, no,
it's Real Time, but he also did Politically Incorrect. So this is like a full, full appropriate situation, I believe, right?
So what? So he used, now I want to clarify. He said he did not say nigga. He said nigger. That's.
I think he used the latter. I think that's the situation.
Okay. Yeah. What was the context in which he was using?
So it was.
I'm assuming that he didn't
just
yell you N-bomb.
No. So it was a joke where he essentially said like, he was using it in the sense that he said like he was a house N-word, So like in the sense that not necessarily
like talking shit about Larry Elder or something like that.
Not even that. I can't even remember. You guys didn't hear about the story? Am I the only one who heard about the story?
Yeah, you
guys. Why am not in the position right now to recapitulate stories.
You're obviously the one that brought it up. If none of us know about it, so.
I was just throwing things out there.
You seem pretty different, dude.
Well, so let's do a quick.
I'm always getting different.
Let's do a quick Google for Bill Maher.
We can do this.
And we'll see what Google says about it.
So I have a
essentially he said
my heart for Bill Maher.
So Bill Maher, let me explain the story real quick. So Bill Maher said this. He said the N-word on his show, but he said it with an intention that I don't believe was to be insulting. He was saying it almost in a satirical way, to where he was like saying like, I'm getting the rough end of the stick on this kind of situation or whatever. Like, he wasn't saying it in an intention
pejorative.
That was pejorative, right?
Got your back, homie.
Yeah, right. But you again, you can always make the argument that no matter, there's a lot of people who don't believe intention matters. So when you come from that side of the stick,
I think it does. I like singing NWA. I'm sorry.
I remember
I get
this.
Told not to.
There's this when I was fucking like 14. I was a freshman in high school, or no, it's like 15. Freshman in high school, and I was like in the fucking like wrestling team in my high school. Like, yeah, please make a lot of jokes. But I remember like being in like the locker room, and then like someone started singing like NWA, and I was singing along, and I like dropped the N-word in front of like all my like colleagues, like a third of which were black. And I was like,
No, I'm on your team. I'm on your team.
I'm on your
I think that's perfectly fine. I mean, you're singing along with a song where somebody else is saying. You're just singing the words that they're singing. I mean, that seems like a stupid thing to get upset about.
I agree. I agree, but like, it's tough though, because not everyone feels that way, and I think like it's not only about what's objectively there from logic. I think it's also there's an existential component that like I can respect, but it's like. I'm just
saying, dude. Maybe some people should just like rub some Vagisil on it and move on.
Yeah, well, I mean, I
maybe, but I think moving on is an easy thing for us to say, though.
Well, I mean, I guess that's a fair argument, but I mean, it's
easier for us, and I won't disagree. Like, so I've heard a lot of people say that when people, there's the Morgan Freeman argument. When we stop talking about it, it'll get better. But like all the same times, like, well, some people can't stop talking about it because it's happened to us on a daily basis. I think in general, I just push for a future where everyone has a greater standard of living, so this kind of thing will become history in the future someday. Once we all transcend to machines, anyways.
Well, I mean, we've had nothing but increasing standards
how do we
of living.
End it sooner? How do we end it sooner?
Well, we don't because people just use it as a cudgel. I mean, you talk about increased standards of living, but
it's a simple answer.
I don't like being grouped into like any sort of group. I don't like being called like fucking white or lumped in with like white people or getting blamed for shit.
Well, neither people who get like neither do the black people.
No,
I think that's fair.
It's totally understandable, dude. And because I'm all about the fucking individual, dude.
Yeah,
I'm all about the smallest minority, bro.
But the problem is that, and I am too. But I think that and
I don't know. Are you?
I'm no social justice warrior by any means. But what I will say is that I think everyone's like that, but by cause of someone else's effect. They have been grouped in that situation, including think of just things like the police, right? Not every cop does this, but in general, I think we know that in big cities, like especially Rust Belt cities with like large like heroin and drug epidemics, and where the war on drugs is 100%. It's maybe you don't personally want to group people or feel like you want to be grouped into, but outside forces will group you into it. And at that point, it's like it becomes its own thing, unfortunately. And so it's like, yeah, it's not ideal. I don't believe in it, but like, unfortunately, some assholes make it a reality.
So I did find the actual like the quote of what Bill Maher said, and again with the caveat of that, I do think that it's so much of this race baiting stuff is just used as a cudgel, and that's why it hasn't gotten better. Like you said, we just need improved standards of living. Well, we've had radical increases in standard of living, and people still aren't letting it go. So I think that's just wishful thinking. However,
I found there's some differences. There's some standards have gotten a lot better, and some standards have gotten worse.
Yeah,
it's not a homogenous thing.
Well, even go to the full NCAP and look at the Federal Reserve and what it's done to.
Like the putting in dollars and cents like figure actually erases a lot of meaning, I feel.
Well, so I found the quote, and I will say that even I find this pretty distasteful. So he was talking with some senator, and
Sassy.
Sassy. Is it Sassy? Is that how it's pronounced? I've seen the name before.
I don't know. I could be wrong. That's just how I pronounce it.
So he made some comment in the context of talking about like helping on the campaign or something in a political context. The senator says to Bill Maher, "You're welcome. We'd love to have you work in the fields with us." To which Maher replied, "Work in the fields, Senator, I'm a house nigga." Now, I don't see how he can't know that that's not even just for using the N-word. I mean, I think that's neither here nor there. The fact that he's comparing himself to an actual slave, that I could see being pretty offensive.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of
clearly. I mean, okay, but
I mean, yes.
And as much as, by the way, I'm not defending this here, not holistically, but I think in one sense,
but in another way.
In another way, he's a comedian, right? So he can exaggerate situations. I do this with my friends. I don't say this word in the situation, but I'm saying like in this idea where he exaggerates the situation to make light of it. But in this, I would say was particularly risky, particularly biting. But I don't necessarily think he was trying to I don't think he honestly believed that he was comparing himself to like chattel slavery, right? I don't think he was doing that honestly. I think
Yeah,
he was
no,
making, I think he was
just a joke.
exaggerating it for the vehicle of humor, which isn't always the best argument, but I think it's if whether you're dealing with a comedian, it is an argument.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think it's a horrific transgression, but I can see for sure how people would find that to be in poor taste, of all things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like rape jokes. I mean, yeah, they can be funny, but there is a line, and maybe it's a fuzzy line, but there is a line where
I think the
it
line
starts
is,
to become distasteful.
I think that line is when the victim becomes the punchline. I think that's a good line to draw with rape jokes.
Well,
I
and so
think that's a
and I think
safe
there's a
assumption, yeah.
And there's a good argument to be made here that he's again, making victims a punchline there. I mean, I don't think he should be, hung out to dry over something like this. But I could definitely see people, going, "Ooh, that was more offensive than it was funny."
Yeah. But and I'm a sick fuck, so I'm into that shit. So fucking
yeah.
love those
Well,
kind
I
of
mean, again,
comedians.
time and place.
Like
I mean,
Anthony Jeselnik, which I think he's kind of formulaic, but when he first came out, I thought he was like pretty refreshing. Like, I love that shit.
yeah. I mean,
I live for that shit.
There are certain things I like about Bill Maher. I don't generally like to defend him.
Because he's a fucking.
But I will when it's appropriate. Here, I mean, again, if anybody tries to say, "Oh God, he should be fired from his show," and blah blah, I mean, that would be over the top. But for people to comment that that's distasteful and a little bit disrespectful, I don't think that would be completely off base.
The one thing I would say about Bill Maher, and the one recommendation I would make about Bill Maher is there's a wonderful YouTube playlist called the Atheist Conversion Kit. And it takes segments from Bill Maher's the movie he made, Religiosity or
Yeah, I saw that.
You know what I'm talking
His
about.
fucking awful ass movie.
Yeah. Or basically he just makes fun of religious people. But there's South Park episode clips. There's a whole bunch in it, and it's just fantastic. And I think Bill Maher did some good material in that specific context that I saw. So.
I disagree. So full disclosure, I do consider myself Catholic. I'm not a very good Catholic, but it is what it is. So I think Bill Maher in that movie specifically just regurgitated a bunch of like really shitty arguments. So I think the highlight of this is so where he talks about like the Jesus story was like precedented by this Egyptian god or some other ancient god.
Few examples, yeah.
Yeah. Essentially where they were saying that like the creation story and the resurrection and like the lifetime of Jesus was the exact same as this god, right? But it's complete bullshit. It's based off one historian who was like just a complete outsider in his field during that point in time, and no one ever, and like his evidence was bad. It wasn't like verified or anything like that. Bill Maher did a shitty job. It was a shock job. I feel like I have a lot of friends who are atheists. I respect a lot of
He picked on
positions.
easy targets.
It was an easy target though. It's an illegitimate target. He's essentially like feeding like Walmart shoppers like Percocets. That's what he was doing. That's what he was doing. He was really dishing down to the lowest intelligence of all atheists. Like, listen, like I understand like Christopher Hitchens and Dawkins. Like I can respect some of their work, but what Bill Maher did in that movie was like fucking another fucking Maddie movie. That's what it was. It was fucking shit.
Yeah,
you should feel bad about liking it. Go kill yourself.
I'm gonna go think about my life's decisions.
Go do it.
I mean, I am a very staunch atheist in terms of my own beliefs, but a lot of atheists really piss me off, and I think it is true that a lot of them bring really cruddy arguments, or at least they're arguments that have already been brought up a million times before. Religious people have offered their counter arguments, which are oftentimes. I mean, again, I don't generally agree with.
Religious people like me make bad arguments too. I'm not gonna, I'm not hypocrite.
Sure. But the point is, there are reasonable and good arguments that are, that have been made in response to these atheist arguments, and the atheists will never bring them up, because then it makes things a little more complicated for them. And really, so many of them seem a lot more interested in simply denigrating religion and people of faith than they are in actually accomplishing anything again, other than feeling good about themselves and tearing other people down.
No, I mean,
and again, I say that as a very staunch atheist in my own beliefs. I mean, I believe they're correct, but they're total assholes.
I mean, like,
in how they go about doing
like,
it.
and I
share that thought about a lot of the vegans, but anyway.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, again, I mean, some people are more interested in being holier than thou, which of course is a hypocritical position for them to have, because of course they complain, oh, these religious people are holier than thou. Now let me tell you why they're completely wrong and I'm completely right, and there's nothing valid that they have to say, and blah blah blah. There's a lot of hypocrisy involved in it, and I just find it annoying and obnoxious. Even though I agree with them, I still think they're complete dicks, about it.
I mean, and clearly Christians have all the same fucking people too. So
Nick,
sure.
Nick. So when you mentioned you're a Catholic, like I thought right away, like, what do you think about that show, The Keepers?
So I've heard about it, and I haven't seen it yet, but it's, again, like, I don't know anything about it, but I assume it's correct.
Well, what do you think about, like, the church, like, shielding and enabling pedophiles?
I'm not happy about that. Clearly, I mean,
but here's
when I say, and this is something I think libertarianism brought me to, was so I always thought people who said that they were spiritual but not religious were, like, full of shit. But I understand the concept, and I think it's nice to have this tradition and a little bit of orthodoxy to kind of look at and see the trail of philosophical and kind of academic input into what you put a lot of value in your life into. But at the same time, I think people look at the bureaucracy and the sins of individuals. But I think we have to be careful and not conflate the sins of individuals for the entire philosophy. I think we can look at bureaucracy and we can blame that for certain things. And I think clearly when the church defended pedophile priests and rapist priests and murderous priests and XYZ, they made a mistake and they're wrong. But does that mean to me as a Catholic that Jesus dying on the cross is any less real? No, it doesn't. But I will say that people go into organizations of power, and the Catholic Church used to be the biggest organization of power for a long time in the world, and it still carries a lot of weight as it is. So of course it's going to attract some deplorables, so to speak. So
yeah, dude. So it's like, why be Catholic?
Because I believe Catholics are the most intelligent of all theists.
How's that?
Because we have the most scholarly work. I think that takes really good logic into point. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. So, like, I don't hate other religions. I'm not a bigot, dude? But I'm not gonna lie though. No, I think that's fine. Like, people do shitty things, but like St. Thomas Aquinas was a fucking badass, and that's what it comes down to.
Dude, I think Martin Luther was much cooler.
Martin Luther was a fucking degenerate. Are you kidding? Dude, that dude, okay, has a ton of fucking problems. Like, I won't get into it because this is nothing, because it's also, like, this is not a very healthy thing to talk about, because I think in general, like, me and a Lutheran are going to agree, like, 90% of the time. But Martin Luther was an interesting individual. I'll say that much. But he was right, though. I mean, the indulgences,
I gotta say,
and the shitty thing about the Catholic Church, he was absolutely right to expose. So I actually think it was a good thing he did it. But he's also not a great human being.
The thing about Martin Luther, though, like him or not, he never fucked any kids.
Well, so that
I bet you know of. Hey, you have to remember, back in those days, like, 13 was legal.
Ooh.
Are you sure? Go think about it. If he had an affair with a chick that, like, no one knew about it, I guarantee you she was like 13, because that's like prime age for him. They only lived through like 35 anyways, right? So he might have.
Yeah, well, I mean, two things, and both what you just mentioned, and also something you touched on. And these are two things that annoy the fuck out of me about atheists. For one, they always bring up the Catholic, molestation and rape and everything. Well, if you look at the rates of molestation among Catholic priests versus public school teachers, it's like an order of magnitude difference. So these atheists,
like, there's more Catholic more Catholic priests raping, or more public teachers?
More public school teachers. Yes, I mean, bad shit happened, and nobody's trying to defend that. But again, I mean, if you say that institutions of power defending child predators is a problem, then the public teachers union and public schools are where you should be directing your outrage.
Well, dude, did you watch The Keepers though, dude?
No, I didn't. I mean, I'm vaguely aware of it, but the point.
Shit.
Oh, well, okay.
I haven't seen either.
And
but they've did some fucked
sure,
up shit.
of course, fucked up shit happens all over the place all the time. And the fact is,
I think
the
the
rates
larger
of
the
this stuff
institution,
happening,
the larger the fucked up shit.
yeah, and the public school teachers union is infinitely larger.
So why not just have like
not from the Catholic Church. Catholic Church is still the largest private property owner in the world.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
like,
okay, but
why not just have an independent church?
Well, so why? If
Why?
the church doesn't matter, right? If what you're saying is like essentially this institution, the bureaucracy is not necessarily what matters, is the beliefs, then you can have as much of it as you want. They're not like putting me there in church with a gun in my head saying you need to show up every week. I interact with the Catholic Church on a very voluntary basis, and there's no subscription that's mandated or anything like that. It's actually very voluntary. Right? There's nothing that they're making me do. So I interact with them completely free of my own will, as much or as little as I want. So what's the problem?
No, I mean, I was just like saying, dude, like in the Keepers, there's like a priest who's like touching kids.
Yeah, I know, and he kills the fucking nun because that finds out about it.
Well, but there's multiple reports of him touching kids, and all they ever do, it seems, they transfer him, they send him to like a mental institution, and then they put him back with kids.
That's changed, though, right?
And he keeps doing it over. Has it? I don't know.
Yeah. So Pope Francis, one of his first things. So I'm a big Jesuit Catholic. I'll put it that way. So Francis was a Jesuit before he went diocesan to become Pope. I actually have the Jesuit motto tattooed on my back. It's the only tattoo I have. But so I'm a big fucking sucker for the Jesuits. But
is it like a Jesuit tramp stamp?
It is essentially it's a Jesuit tramp stamp, and you're not the first person that commented it described it like that. So you're 100% right. But so besides the fact that most Jesuits are like socialist and like economically ignorant, I think that they do have a good outlook when it comes to like poverty and like being like legit. Essentially, they're the academics of the Catholic Church for sure. So when Francis first showed up, he created this. I guess it's like a council for for prioritizing investigations of molestation in the church, and it actually has victims of molestation in the past as board members to ensure that it's a transparent process. I will say that recently, I think it was like a couple months ago, someone resigned from the board that was a victim because she felt like the Catholic Church wasn't being as I guess like cooperative as they could be, but I know there's other members, but that's something that kind of I think to evaluate this sort of effort put by Francis in. But I think at the end of the day, like he's been pretty good talking about no tolerance. But I also know that he's commuted some sentences for certain priests that didn't involve necessarily like defrocking and stuff like that. But I think at the end of I think he's putting forth an effort. It's better than Benedict, that crazy Nazi fuck. But I think in general, like the Catholic Church is trying to make an effort, and it's getting better. It's not what it could be, and I think most people want it to fucking be transparent about this shit.
Well, it certainly sounds like a hell of a lot more effort than the teachers union does. I mean, again, you bring up this anecdotal thing that happened many decades ago, but in the meantime, this is, again, all the things you described, like they cover it up, they move them from one church to another. Well, that's exactly what they do with the public school teachers. And again, it happens at literally like an order of magnitude greater rate. So, it annoys the hell out of me when people criticize the church for, bad shit happening when, in fact, their rate of bad shit happening is a hell of a lot better than most other institutions. So, for again, all these atheist activists or whatever you want to call them, they bring up all these arguments. It's like, well, but they're doing a better job than these other institutions that you revere. I mean, again, the quote-unquote atheist community is, so far as I understand the numbers are, they're swaying radically left. And I mean, I think we all know this anecdotally from our own lives. Religious people tend to be more on the right, and atheist people tend to be more on the left. So again, these are people. These are changing, but yeah, these are people that are going out there and attacking religion, saying, "Oh, they're all just kid diddlers," and then they will defend public teachers unions, to their last breath, which is just massively hypocritical. The other thing I wanted to point out, and you talked about St. Thomas Aquinas. I mean, of course, as far as I understand, the university system as we know it today comes from the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. It frustrates the hell out of me how little appreciation people have for the fact that Western civilization was built on and by Christians, and probably the Catholics more than any other denomination, but even just as Christianity in general, is de facto the foundation of all Western civilization, and pretty much everything good that's happened for the last 1,000 to 2,000 years, especially the last 1,000 years.
I wouldn't say that.
I'm sorry,
but a lot of things.
I'm going to call bullshit
not
on
all
that.
that. Not all that,
that's
but a lot
garbage.
of things.
It's the That's a great argument. It's the foundation. It's the foundation for everything, for the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and
Christianity is not the
else.
foundation of the Renaissance. Come on.
Well, the Renaissance it is,
Scientific and
yes.
empirical thought.
Of the Renaissance,
And
absolutely yes.
where did the sciences come from?
Yo, there was science in Madrid, Spain, where Jews and Muslims and Christians all got along long before the Enlightenment came to Europe.
That happened everywhere in Europe. But anyways, so one thing I do want to point out, that I want to say this one thing, because we've been talking about like Christians versus atheists. One of my favorite stories about Catholics and atheists comes down to the, I guess, like the canonization of Mother Teresa. So I don't know if you guys know this, but
Penn and Teller did an episode.
Oh, really? I don't watch their show.
I saw it a long time ago, but I don't really remember.
So
anyway, sorry.
so in general, like, so Mother Teresa, like, I'm sure we all know, like, who she was. And so the Catholic Church had disbanded. So when you get a saint canonized, so the official, like, program and situation of getting a person becoming an official saint in the Catholic Church's eyes, it's a very long process. And so part of it, they used to have this thing called the devil's advocacy, which is where the term comes from, where a person would lobby on, against in the opposition of this person becoming a saint. And so the Catholic Church actually stopped doing this process. But then when Mother Teresa came up, they actually temporarily reinstated it to allow Christopher Hitchens to be the devil's advocate against Mother Teresa.
Whoa.
Christopher Hitchens legitimately presented the argument against Mother Teresa to the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church allowed it, and they invited him to do it, and he was willing to do it. It's one of my favorite fucking stories.
I had no idea.
About sometimes when the church, like, gets things fucking right. They take the fucking great arguments,
amazing.
and they apply it, and they say, do it. I mean, regardless, I think clearly they voted in favor of Mother Teresa. But the very fact they invited, I think, was ostensibly one of the most intelligent, worldly...
respected.
Well-respected voices in the New Age atheist community. I think that really speaks volumes to, I think, sometimes people who are skeptical of the Catholic Church and saying, like, these guys aren't necessarily just in it for, the bureaucracy in the past and this hegemony of religion. They're interested in truth.
Yeah, no, and again, I mean, that's a foundation of Western civilization, is the pursuit of truth. Now, that doesn't mean that they've gotten everything right all along.
Of course.
But it just frustrates the hell out of me when people throw the baby out with the bathwater and say that, oh, well, you can't scientifically prove the existence of God, and therefore your institution is anti-science, when, again, I mean, universities come out of Christianity, in particular Catholicism. This notion that, they had nothing to do with any sort of scientific advancement is
Just so I know,
So actually, like
Google.
even like transhumanism, like, came out of
just
Jesuit
Google,
Catholics.
where did universities come from?
Well, I was gonna say, just so I know what to Google, what you're saying is, I am saying from ignorance, so I'm gonna look up. But what you're saying is, there's no history of higher learning outside of.
No, I never said that.
That's not right. No.
You said college. What is that if not the equivalent of like higher learning?
Because there's
Or are we
other.
talking about
There's
something specific that
I'm
missed?
saying that those institutions came from the Catholic Church and Christianity at large.
Okay.
I mean, it's just historical fact. I mean, I'm not saying that they're exclusively the only people that ever made any scientific advancement. I mean, that's just a caricature of the point. But the fact is, historically, particularly up until the Renaissance and the last couple 100 years, they were the driving force behind pretty much all scientific advancement. Now, one could argue that, well, they were the only institution with power, so of course they were the only ones behind, scientific advancement. Okay, maybe that's a fair argument, but the fact is, historically, they still were the driving force behind a lot of advancement, both in philosophy, ethics, economics. I think Tom Woods actually had an episode in particular.
Well, he's biased.
Recently.
Yeah.
Well, again, I mean, he's Catholic, actually. I think, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But the point is, I mean,
there's a long history of actually Catholic punk rock libertarians. There's a history of that. There's like Alexis is actually a Catholic punk rock libertarian.
Well, there you go.
Is Alexis still Catholic, or is he? Like...
That's what he told me yesterday.
So he's still Catholic.
That's what he told me. That's what he told me yesterday. Maybe he's wrong, but he told me yesterday.
I don't know. Okay, I was just curious.
He self-identifies as a Catholic. You bigot, who are you to question him?
Yeah.
No,
use his preferred pronouns.
I didn't know. Yeah.
Was it Are you guys in the transhumanism at all?
I've heard of it. I'm not really that
I've
familiar
been waiting
with it.
for the climax, but it just hasn't come yet.
Aren't we all? But
That's what she said.
yeah, right. So there's another famous like Jesuit. His name's like Pierre Chardin. He's actually one of the first transhumanists, where he talks about. So there's a lot of anarcho-capitalists, libertarian transhumanists. It's a very common kind of.
A lot of anarchists in general.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. So he was the guy who coined this term like the omega point, where technology and progress kind of hits this inflection, or just kind of amplifies to some end that is just determined based on like everything progressing. And so like it's kind of funny like how many times like the Catholic Church intersects with like hardcore libertarianism. So there's actually like a group called like Catholic libertarians and stuff like that. It's a weird subculture.
Yeah, that one.
What? What the fuck did you say?
Transhumanists.
Catholic I'm a Catholic transhumanist.
They're out there.
They are. It's kind of weird though, because like when we're all robots, like shit gets kind of complicated.
So for those who don't know, the idea of transhumanism is that the human brain will eventually converge with technology. Like
that's a part of it. I think transhumanism, generally speaking, is this idea that clearly primates aren't human, but humans are relative to primates. It's this idea that human beings will evolve again to a point that is very different than the paradigm of our reality, in the sense of we breathe oxygen to live, we have to eat food and drink water. It's essentially being in our body is nothing more than a vehicle for consciousness, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what it comes down to, and I think the idea is that either through development, making great strides in biology and genetic engineering, but I think what's more likely is going to happen is transcending our bodies and essentially melding with technology to where we can then live forever in some aspects, I guess.
Do you think we'll see it
in our lifetime? No. Some people I know who are anarcho-capitalist transhumanists, like they think yes. I think they're wrong. I think our generation's the generation that will live to be really old. I think we can develop technology. So my background is I'm a drug development guy. I'm a scientist, and that's the work I do is making drugs. And I think that the technology we have, especially genome engineering, will result in expansions of our life. Probably about an average of 25 years, at least in our lifetime. But I think in 200 years is probably when we're going to see things like the singularity.
Wow.
And essentially downloading our consciousness and using neural networks to really kind of recapitulate. I say recapitulate too many times this episode, but capitulate our consciousness into a physical data storage framework. And I think that's when things get real fucking interesting.
Hey man, you didn't butcher Catholic transhumanists, so you're fine. You're good.
That's good.
I'm trying to look up this Tom Woods episode where he talked about the Catholic Church's role in the development of Western civilization.
Well, while you do that, I'm gonna take a piss.
All right, fair enough. So what else do we have in here? Oh, Matt's junk is on there, but there's not much to talk about that. I mean, there's not much there to begin with.
You have to pay extra for that, right? That's in the after show?
Yeah, that's behind the paywall.
Yeah, that's for our Patreon subscribers.
The Kathy Griffin thing. Do you guys have any thoughts on this whole episode? I mean, I find the whole thing is a bit blown out of proportion, I think, to begin with. But at the same time, her playing the victim in the whole thing, I find incredibly obnoxious. She's saying like, "Oh God, Trump has broke me," and blah blah blah. It's like all he did was tweet that like, "Yeah, that was a really nasty thing for my son to have to see." Which, I mean, regardless of what you think about him making that comment, for then Kathy Griffin to then flip that around into, I'm the victim, he's bullying me. It's like, wait a second, you fucking held up his head covered in blood like you're fucking ISIS, and now suddenly you're the victim of bullying. I mean, I just find that laughable at best.
I think she's going to be just fine, and I think if somebody did that to Obama, it was like, that there would be much more hell to pay.
Well, it's funny. Everybody's comparing her to Ted Nugent, and how Ted Nugent made a comment at a concert saying Obama can suck on my machine gun, or whatever. Well, you know what? He did have backlash from that, and leftists do hate him for it.
I mean, there were nooses and signs.
Well, Ted Nugent didn't do that.
Well, no, not Ted Nugent, but
Guar did.
Oh well, that may
be
be
fucking cool.
They
assassinated the Nazi Pope.
I mean, and of course, I mean, like the left didn't do all that exact same stuff with George Bush, during his 8 years. I mean, it's pretty standard fare stuff. And that's why I say it's a bit overblown to get, all hyperventilated about Kathy Griffin. But at the same time, I mean, I don't really see the right, hyperventilating that much about it. I mean, they're just sort of like, well, yeah, that's really disrespectful. That's in poor taste. Now I'm going to boycott you. CNN said, okay, you're fired from the New Year's Eve special. I mean, those all seem, like pretty even-handed responses. Like, this isn't like there's some fucking witch hunt out, to fucking destroy her entire family and lynch Kathy Griffin or something. People said, like, wow, that was ignorant, and, we don't appreciate that. It's disrespectful, and now we're not going to, watch your TV specials. But that's the same thing that happened to Ted Nugent as well. It should, and so be it. And then she trots herself out as some ultimate victim. It's like, no, go fuck yourself. I mean, these are pretty reasonable repercussions. And honestly, I'm not convinced that it wasn't, a 4D chess move of her own to create controversy and thus boost her career.
Just get her name out there,
So, everybody's talking about her. Of course, the right wing doesn't like her. The right wing didn't really like her that much anyway. And she's boosted her leftist credibility, which is where her fan base is anyway. So,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not convinced this isn't all a deliberate publicity stunt, anyway.
Word, dude. It's you think it's like Soros funded?
Well, I mean, it's all Soros funded. So, I mean, really, I think that's the only thing that's remarkable there is that she's tried to portray herself as some blathering victim who's crying on TV. I mean, it's just pathetic. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I agree.
So, I don't know. I mean, the whole thing is just kind of a big nothing burger, and it's just, it's funny that she tries to make it into a bigger thing. I mean, she's more upset about it than I think anybody on the right is.
I think she made it worse.
But I think one thing we can all agree on is if you drone civilians and children, you deserve to get your head cut off and mocked.
Well, so then, obviously that should have happened to Obama a long time ago, who droned more people than anybody else prior or since.
Yeah, and Bush.
Mostly, but no.
I
don't like...
08, no.
I think... Oh, so have I. 08, Jesus, dude. I've been hating Obama before that. You're like...
He's old school.
Aren't you like 16? Like, dude, what the fuck are you talking about?
I just turned 19, actually.
Yeah, shit.
No, like... I'm a big believer of, like, I think people can clearly... pay you back more if you don't kill them. I'd be fine with indefinite slavery. That's fine.
There you go.
I'm not gonna. I don't want to call Donald Trump's head. I want him to be in a work camp producing, digging for diamonds or some shit. That's what I want him to do.
So justice is not about punishment; it's about restitution.
Partially, yeah. Well, I mean, there's two points to that. I think. What civil law and common law likes to do is like they add extra punishment for deterrence, right? I think that's an interesting thing that I think a lot of people haven't really fully flushed out in libertarian philosophy yet, but for a different day.
I have heard some pretty compelling arguments.
Like Rothbard had like a really weird proportionality of justice situation going on.
Like, like eye for an eye kind of a thing, or
what was it? Today's not my day.
We're talking about Rothbard.
Yeah.
How he said you could sell children. No,
not just sell them.
Right. No,
wink.
It's property.
I like Rothbard. I agree with a lot of his critics that everything he wrote after the '90s is regrettable. But
well, yeah, he was almost dead, so makes sense. He's definitely past his
I hope
prime.
I'm that smart, that old.
So what else do we have on here? Well, I guess we haven't. Well, there's the Evergreen College thing. I feel like that could get pretty long. But more recently, unfortunately, there's the London attack.
All right.
Of course, which one? Of course, we're talking
Which
about the
one?
one
Yeah.
last. I think it was last night, right, or yesterday?
So I remember it's actually kind of funny. So when I've only been to London like one time in my life, and it was 2005, and I saw this concert called Live 8. Saw Pink Floyd perform. It's pretty cool. No joke.
Just this little shindig.
Just a little shindig. But like a week after is when they had the Piccadilly bombings in the subway, and that was like the biggest terrorist attack until the one they had. Like, was it last week or 2 weeks ago?
The Manchester.
Yeah, the Manchester, and then with the Ariana Grande or whatever, and
Yeah.
then the one this time.
Was that really the biggest? I mean, I know the Ariana Grande one. I think it was like around 20 or low 20s.
I think that was bigger than the underground bombings. Yeah, at least maybe. Well, maybe I could be wrong. I don't remember. But I remember like the way that the mainstream media was presenting it was like if you're making a timeline, that'd be point A, and this was point B, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, was there anything you wanted to add about the London aspect? I mean, you said you had been to London, so that was
Yeah,
the
so,
2005
like,
attack.
You know, I think it's pretty clear that England is, at least in my opinion, if we look at what we consider to be like Western civilization, I think there's three countries to look at. We look at the United States, I think we look at the UK, and I think we look at Germany. I think that's kind of how I have to spread it. And
Does France fall anywhere in there for you, or
no, they're fucking communist as shit, so they can suck a dick. But
well, I mean, obviously they were instrumental in the U.S. establishing their
of course.
independence, but of course, you know,
they gave us a couple troops and they gave us a fucking Iron Lady or whatever, you know. She's made out of copper. What?
Yeah, well, that was well after the fact.
Surely it won't tarnish and turn green.
Wait, like they gave us. I mean, I wasn't there, dude.
They give a lot of things up, like
I'm
wars.
just saying, dude. Like we weren't really there, dude. So they didn't really give it to us.
Because Matt's an individual.
Wait, what are you talking about? Oh, okay, yeah, okay, whatever. Can we move on to the heart of this conversation?
Sure.
All right. What's my opinion on this shit? I don't know. Like, I guess my opinion on this shit has to come down to like gun rights. You know, people complain that you can't do awful things without guns, but I think that's clearly true in this situation. These guys had knives. They're all like 10 to 12-inch knives.
Well, knives and trucks.
And people, and you know, a lot of people argue, you know, there's more. Or we use the deaths due to vehicles as kind of a interesting argument to the bar, I think, in the United States when it comes to like gun fatalities. And people always say, but cars weren't designed to like, you know, kill people, but it's very clear.
I mean, I think one could argue that almost makes it worse. You know, they say, oh, but guns are actually designed to kill people. Well, it's like, well, yeah, but here you have something, it's not even supposed to be doing it, and it's killing more people.
That's the point.
So, I mean, I think you can look at that from two different perspectives. And, of course, you know, the anti-gun argument, particularly here in the U.S., you know, they point to homicide. You know, well, of course, the latest thing is they use gun deaths.
But even that, and a third of it's suicides.
Because the vast majority of that is suicide.
Well, no, you're right, 2/3 is suicides. It's either 1/3 or 2/3.
I want to say it's around 1/3.
I would have said one.
Maybe it's one. I'm wrong here.
But I guess from memory.
But no, you're right. I think it's one. I think it's like 11,000.
Yeah, but the point is, you know, they'll bring up, you know, they'll say 15,000 gun deaths. It's like, well, okay, but 5,000 of those are suicide, so that doesn't.
Well, no,
really
it's
count.
about 33. But anyways,
well, regardless of what.
Not that I know this.
What I figure. The point is that it's
disingenuously.
No, it's incredibly disingenuous, and of course they're not talking about all the gun deaths that were legitimate and justified. Mm-hmm. You know, they'll talk about like, look at all these police shootings. It's like, well, yeah, but how many of them were guys that were criminals that were out assaulting and raping and robbing and, you know, pulling their own guns on the cops?
And how many of the police deserved it?
I don't know.
That's for the after hours.
Oof.
My name is Mick Ralcatera. Thank you for inviting me on this podcast. It's nice to meet you, Mitch.
Yeah, and of course that doesn't even address all the potential gun deaths and other violence that are prevented by the presence of guns. Which even by FBI and other federal government statistics, and these have been, as far as I understand, corroborated by all sorts of self-reported crime victimization surveys that are done independently of the government. Point to, I've seen figures. There's a pretty big spread, like an order of magnitude, but the amount of violent crimes that are prevented by the presence of guns, they're called DGUs, defensive gun uses, are so vastly outstrip, gun deaths even as a whole,
and
not
underreported.
Well, yes, and that's a lot of the reasons why the numbers are really all over the map. But and a lot of these.
To Kyle Wagner?
I did join his debate group.
I was one of the original members of that debate group, and I was like number 20 or 30, and I left twice. I kept on getting invited back in. Fuck that group.
It's pretty
Kyle,
ridiculous.
Dude.
Well, I mean, it's
I am OG Kyle. It's funny. So I had Kyle over last night, and he was making some comment about it's kind of surreal being weirdly internet famous. Some guy was gawking over the fact that I liked his post, and then some guy responded he liked one of my posts the month before and shit. I don't understand how he's famous. I don't fucking understand it. It's a fucking Kyle Wagner. Why the fuck is he? Okay, Kyle, forgive me.
I mean, I think it's more
he's awesome.
The meme is famous more than the person, but either way.
My favorite meme is it's like the Wolverine meme where Wolverine's got a picture. He's holding a picture, and it's something he's remembering. And it's Kyle Wagner's face is on Wolverine. It's a Trump photo. Because clearly, if he's not an anarcho-capitalist, he's just a hardcore Trump voter. That's what these groups are all predicated on.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been in the debate group a week, and it's just like every other Facebook debate group.
Why
would you
shit
show?
No, it comes down to the fact that Kyle doesn't, and his minarchist cronies don't understand that game theory is a thing. They don't think that there can be incentive outside of what's blatantly in your fucking face. They have no recognition for group dynamics or fucking, I think in general, the idea of destruction of market failures. They have a very, very antiquated, almost Keynesian perspective of economics and public choice and
the one thing I've noticed from the minarchist arguments that I've seen, and Kyle was on the show, I think it was just last week or maybe 2 weeks ago.
That's what caused me to ask me to come on the show. I'm like, why the fuck is Kyle on the show? I should be on the show. Fuck Kyle.
They seem to fail to understand. They say, oh, well, there's all these problems in this theoretical ANCAP society, and thus that's why we need government to fix it, without realizing that all those problems already do exist under the government. Yeah. Even there are military courts, police, minarchist government. Those problems still will exist, and the government is still incapable of solving them. So it doesn't really give it an advantage over ANCAPistan.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily their best argument. I think their best argument is essentially comes down to people have to follow by the same rules. This idea that if you don't have someone enforcing to be the best rules, it's not going to happen. And it comes down to this idea that you need someone to compel society. You need someone to essentially you need to have applications of force to ensure that people don't kill each other, that people trade the same way. And he thinks that the only way that can happen is some weird statist situation, and that these kind of values and these kind of standards and hallmarks are not equally valued by a stateless society, one that could actually see some benefit in this without the fact that there's just a bully in the middle of the room enforcing it. Because I think there is market-based, there is demand and supply-based kind of hallmarks and standards for society. And I think that's what it comes down to, and they just don't believe that it can ever exist. They believe you have to have the state to ensure that people don't kill each other in the streets, which I think is wrong. I think once you kill someone on the street, you then break this game theory kind of mode, where then people also think it's okay to kill you, and I think that's not the situation. I think people don't want that to happen to them, so they won't just kill people in the middle of the streets.
Yeah, well, that's sort of the whole point. I found some of the arguments you brought up that were kind of interesting. Was basically you need to have some sort of consensus, which certainly at least resembles democracy, if not is democracy explicitly, and that is true. But So if his theory then is that you won't have consensus in Ancapistan, and that's why it won't work. Well, okay, so if you have a minarchy, if you don't have consensus, well, then you again still have people fighting over the reins of power. And he also seems to have a misunderstanding of the non-aggression principle. It's not a non-violence principle. It's not a principle that says you can't use force. It's simply an objective standard by which we apply force and violence.
Oh yeah, so like rights are correlative, and I think this is there's a good, again, I'm gonna do some dick ride on Kinsella again.
Oh sweet.
Where there's an episode where Kinsella talks to Tom Woods about like 5 big libertarian fallacies, and one is this idea that positive rights and obligations don't exist, but it's true they do if you incur them through a violation of negative rights. So it's the same idea, like where you're owed to do something if you violate. So there is a place for violence and force in society, but it's not initial aggression. So you're right.
Yeah. Good dick riding.
Thanks. I think he finished. So.
Yeah. So I think that's about it for this week.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good.
So until next time, live free
or die.
You die hard.
Yeah.
Bruce Willis style.
Statism's footprint is the blood that is shed. Drenching the flags on the tax bombs in red. Poisoned by a few at the expense of the many. Sold to the gods and the death machine. You can't justify killing by economic gain. For God, country, and democracy, you can put freedom in gunpoint in a foreign land. You support the troops, then bring them home. I believe that you will do the best for you. And I believe that we have the power, I hate the state, and I know I'm a slave. We can make a break the power. Society owes individuals nothing more than non-interference with natural rights. Once a virtuous person fully comprehends the non-aggression principle, the violence in the state becomes obsolete.